we talk about really one of the most fundamental issues about how Florida survives and thrives and grows and is successful. Thanks for all the experts and the advocates in the room that come together and help make sure that we've got a plan for quality water and a plentiful supply for what we need. I want to start out by thanking the American Water Works Association. I want to thank Doug Mann, who has worked hard on putting this together. I certainly want to thank my team, especially our chief lobbyist, Brewster Beavis, who's here, Melissa Luke, and Michelle Smith, who are probably outside handling the arrangements. So we appreciate everybody being here. We're going to hear from a great crew of experts on water policy, including some of the leading policy coordinators at the local and the regional and the water management and the state level today. We're going to hear from a good friend of Florida's and water and ag, Adam Putnam, at lunch, and we hope that you'll be able to stay and welcome the Secretary. We're going to hear from a number of legislators that were leaders in passing some important legislation this past session and will probably be instrumental in 2014 and beyond, and they'll tell you what the legislation does. The policy folks will be able to tell you how they expect to implement that legislation, so all very valuable. An admonition for those of you that told your bosses you would be here at the forum: the Florida Channel is streaming this live, so you may want to make yourself visible so your boss doesn't think you're out golfing or snuck over to SeaWorld. And for the speakers here, you also want to make sure you know that the Florida Channel is covering this, so no off-color jokes here at the Water Forum. We may host during the legislative session, a manure forum at AIF, and that would be the more appropriate place to tell those sorts of off-color jokes. I think as we move on today, and discuss at the agency level how the implementation of 2013 policy is going to affect all of us. You'll want to take close notes because many of your companies will be impacted directly. Associated Industries of Florida continues to support solutions to expand the water supply and enhance the quality of water in Florida. We can't think of anything more fundamental to all the different industry lines that we're engaged in, whether it's transportation, whether it's agriculture, whether it's development, all the things, manufacturing. We're the state affiliate of the National Association of Manufacturing. All the things that AIF is involved in depend on a plentiful quality supply of water. The Alliance worked hard in 2006 and 2007 in order to protect state funding of alternative water supply projects under Senate Bill 444. Unfortunately, the recession has dampened the ability to resource and fund that bill at adequate levels. So going forward, one of the things we'll be working on is trying to get the resources to implement the good policy that was enacted in the 2006 and 2007 efforts. On the water quality front, AIF, I think, was the leader in the fight over the numeric nutrient criteria mandates. The federal government at the EPA level was trying to impose solutions on us that made no sense and dealt with some problems that didn't exist, while they didn't actually meet the problems and challenges that Florida water quality has. So working with our legislature on a bipartisan basis, working with Secretary Vinland, working with our congressional delegation at the U.S. level and our senators, AIF was able to help coordinate all the varied interests to make sure we had some common sense, rational policy come out of those EPA numeric nutrient criteria proposed mandates. We think the policy, while it's not perfect, makes a great deal more sense than what was about to be imposed on us. Those battles aren't entirely completed, but for the most part, we have a consensus between the EPA and the Florida's DEP on a path forward that will make sense and most of us can live with. So I want to thank everybody involved in that fight. It's not over. We need to see it through to completion. But given the success in that arena, in order to better coordinate future efforts dealing with water policy, I'm pleased to announce that AIF intends to merge the Water Alliance and the Numeric Nutrient Criteria Task Force into what we intend to call the Florida H2O Coalition. The H2O Coalition will work on many of the same issues with many of the same associations, municipalities, counties, business, industry, and government leaders in order to develop comprehensive, good quality and quantity water policy for the state of Florida. We invite all of you and your interested parties to join this H2O coalition. We will be getting more information out to you in the weeks following this conference. In closing, I want to thank again the legislators, the agency folks for being here today, explaining the laws that were passed, explaining how they'll be implemented. And I most importantly want to thank again our sponsors that make it possible for us to get together on an annual basis and then work together throughout the calendar year to make sure we've got good water policy in Florida. So thank you very much. I think I'm going to turn it over to John or Jason. Jason.
Thank you very much, Tom. My name is Jason Perillo. I'm chair of the Florida section of the American Water Works Association. I want to thank everyone for being here today because it shows how important this particular issue is to the citizens of Florida. We are very privileged to be able to team with AIF to address this very important issue of water and how it's going to be addressed throughout the coming generations. Our organization is comprised of over 2,400 members that are volunteers, and we represent the Florida's water professionals. We also comprise about 80% of the utilities that make potable water for the state of Florida. So you can see we have a big vested interest as an organization to how we proceed and move forward on this very important topic.
Who's excited about water policy? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You know what's interesting is I've traveled around the state and had the opportunity to go speak to folks about various issues that the state is dealing with and what our challenges are. Invariably, and it seemed like it's happened over maybe the last 6 months or 8 months, but invariably water comes up. I think that's exciting, and I'll tell you why. First of all, the opportunity for us as a legislative body, and quite frankly, for the people in this room that are going to be decision makers and influencers and folks that provide information into our system that we make our decisions from, I think we're on the verge of something very serious. We're on the verge of a couple of things. Number one, I don't like using the word necessarily so, but you know, water wars are very serious. And from an agricultural perspective, a lot of times it doesn't work very well with ag when we have a water war. So clearly what we need to be able to do, because the awareness is coming up, we all know in this room that water is a significant resource for the state. And we also know that we have to work together. Now today, I've heard Commissioner Putnam say it over and over, and I think he is spot on. Today, we have construction, tourism, and agriculture. All three of those are important pillars in our economy. And we have to make sure as we go forward that we're paying attention to the needs of all three. I'm a citrus grower. That's what I do for a living. Proud member of Florida Citrus Mutual. And I will tell you, there's unrest in the ag industry over water. Because what tends to happen is, and listen, I was elected to talk about the truth, and to my constituents and to you, that's what I'm going to do. A lot of times in the ag world, there's a lot more acres of production agriculture in the state than there are members of the Florida House or the Florida Senate. So a lot of times what happens is in the agricultural world is we get outnumbered. So last year, one of the pieces of legislation that I want to talk with you about, because it is significant, Senate Bill 948. For those of you that are listening on the Florida channel, I appreciate you covering this, and obviously before I get started, Speaker Feeney and the AIF folks, thank you very much for investing the time in this water forum. It certainly should yield excellent perspective, hopefully some innovation and solutions. Senate Bill 948 was passed last year. It's been signed by the governor, and it does something really simple. Now, there are various parts of it, but it does something very simple. It means a great deal to the ag industry. What it does is it brings agriculture to the table. Now, In the past, what would happen is, as regional water plans were being put together, or quite frankly, any planning that was being put together for water usage in the future, there was kind of an informal relationship that would happen between the water management districts or DEP, some of these folks, and agriculture. So what Senate Bill 948 has done, the most significant thing that it has done, it has formalized that relationship. So now, FDACS, vis-a-vis the voice of agriculture, is at the table when water policy is crafted, when information is being sought to understand the impact of agriculture, its use and its water use, and the impact on its region. So first, of course, FDACS will be at the table. They will be there for the planning process. They will be providing information from various sources, but they will be providing information to the decision makers in the process that will determine those water needs. It adds self-suppliers to the list of folks that the water management districts will work with. And effectively what that does is it creates the ability for them to have partnerships, formalized partnerships for financing of projects or construction or maintenance or those types of things. That's important, especially for agriculture, because generally speaking, agriculture is a self-supplier. We pay for our own wells, we drill them, we put the pump in, and we provide our own water. It also does something important. What it does is it gives FDACS the ability to establish an ag water supply planning program. This is significant because to be able to pull the perspectives of the state from an agricultural realm, if you will, into the room and be able to talk about our needs and be able to talk about what it is that we need going forward is significant, and to formalize that process is fantastic. There were funds and resources that were in the General Appropriations Act that will support that process for FDACS to be able to accomplish that. Basically, that's Senate Bill 948. It's a major step for agriculture. I want to bring up a couple of things, though, thinking forward a little bit. We all know that today we cannot continue the groundwater withdrawal at the rate that we're doing it. So we have to be thinking about alternative water resources. I've heard that term, I think, 3 times already this morning. I'm sure we're going to hear it a significant amount through the rest of the day. One of the ways that we can, I think, grow the water pie in the state of Florida is through desalination. What I'd like to be able to see us do, and I'm open to any ideas at all, what I'd like to be able to see us do is to figure out what the hurdles are and break them down. What are the hurdles, not just financial, but from a policy perspective? What are the hurdles for us to be able to get very, very serious here in the state of Florida for the utilization of desalinized water? It's an important drought-proof piece of the pie. So if you have an idea, if you know where these hurdles are, please, please let us know. It is a significant resource that should be utilized, at least in my opinion, more significantly here in the state. I remember 12 or 13 years ago, we were managing a citrus property down in Indiantown, Florida. And right after we took over the management in our private company, right after we took over the management of that grove parcel, there was an 80-acre reservoir. Now, of course, in that part of the world, there are canals that run through and you pump water in and out of a grove property and you utilize it for irrigation and you manage it for drainage, but that is effectively where you get your irrigation water. Just a short time after we took the property over, a gate failed and the dike burst and it drained that 80 acres that was used to irrigate a couple thousand acres of citrus. Now, you could see that was a significant problem. So the reason that I tell you that story is that I know, floating around out there in the industry, there's a concern. We recognize in production agriculture that we need to be doing something different than just withdrawing from the aquifer. Many times we have no choice, but we recognize that's something we should be thinking about. What I would suggest to you is for us to be able to get Florida growers out of the box and be thinking about alternative water sources, like utilizing the Farms program. Fantastic cost share program. The way we do that is we figure out where the liabilities are, where the risk is for growers that we're asking to help us accomplish these tasks. We're asking them to put their capital at risk. So we need to figure out, as an example, and I only pose this as a question, and Rich, you and I talked about this last night. I only pose this as a question, a suggestion, an igniter, if you will, so maybe somebody has a solution. If we're going to ask farmers to utilize the Farms program, to be able to work with us at the state level, to help create alternative water sources, we have to make sure that their consumptive use permits are not in jeopardy. Because one day, ultimately the goal is, with this Farms program or anything else that we imagineer, ultimately the goal is to reduce groundwater withdrawal, to capture more of what we get, what God gives us for rainfall, and utilize it to irrigate our crops. But ultimately, there is a risk, and the risk is the gate fails, the dike bursts, and the water that we use is gone. So we have to figure out a way to make sure, if we want agriculture to be the type of partner that we want agriculture to be in this endeavor, we have to think about how to hedge that risk for them and not necessarily put their consumptive use permit quantities at risk just because they're not utilizing it as significantly as they were in the past. Because they may have put in a reservoir, capture rainfall, and utilize surface water that might not always be there. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. I do. And quite frankly, I very much appreciate the fact that you're here today. It's important. The topic of water is significant. And as we move forward, I will make this promise to you. If you have an idea on what can make water policy better in this state, if you have an idea of what can help bring consensus within the bounds of the state when it comes to water policy, please do not hesitate to give me a call. Stop by the office, whatever it is, because I'd like to hear from you. And the last point that I want to make is we need to remember, at least from my perspective, and I'll bet yours, is that when we're talking about water in the future, everything has to be on the table. Everything. Everything. And that means we have to be more innovative, we have to be more creative, and we have to be more open-minded. So I would encourage you to do those things. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I know it's going to be a fantastic time, and we're going to hear a lot. So I'm here to serve you, and please just give me a call. Love to hear from you. Thank you.
A reminder, please fill out any questions you have. Raise your hand, and our delightful host will pick them up. Please welcome Rich Boudel, who's currently the Director of the Office of Agriculture Water Policy at the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. He's been involved with water supply planning and agricultural conservation for 28 years at the department. Thank you. Rich.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about how the office and the department is going to implement the changes to Part 7 of Chapter 373 and our new water supply planning program. But I want to take a minute or two to just give you a little background. As the representative described, the genesis of the bill last year was an issue that, we've only been involved in water supply planning in Florida for, 15 years, 20 years maybe? And there's not very many examples of regional water supply plans that have been developed that cross district boundaries. And the first one that we got involved in really heavily is the one that's in place right here in the area we're sitting, the Central Florida Water Initiative. It's been underway for a couple of years, starts and stops, but a very significant development in that it brings for the first time the three big water management districts together to develop one regional water supply plan instead of three different plans to be implemented comprehensively. And in our involvement in that, I serve on the steering committee with a number of other folks. Something became obvious for really the first time. It kind of gelled in my mind that the way that each of those three districts have dealt with agriculture as a land use in their prior water supply planning, they all used different methodologies, slightly different methodologies. They had different crop groupings and different crop listings. They used different soil coefficients, water use coefficients. They used different methodologies to determine what are the irrigation demands for different combinations of crops and cropping strategies and patterns. And as a result of that, it said, well, we wondered, why is that? Why, from a planning standpoint, are different methodologies used for the same crop, even within the same county, just because it might exist in the South Florida Water Management District on one side of Polk County and Southwest Florida Water Management District on the other. And I saw that as an opportunity. We have always, as the representative described, participated informally in the regional water supply planning, providing comments that have always been very positively received and incorporated into the regional water supply plans by the districts. But we thought that there was an opportunity to make the planning better, trying to insert more consistency, a little more uniformity, and not trying to take over the planning process, but be a filter for the data. And so we structured these changes to Part 7 of 373, the water supply planning portion of the statute, to accomplish that. And I have a great deal of thanks to offer to Senator Denise Grimsley and Representative Travis Hudson for sponsoring the bill. They carried the water for the bill, so to speak. And as well as many others. Representative Albritton's committee, helped fund that program, and so it's been a team effort. A lot of stakeholders involved, and we never could have done it without the districts and DEP's support. So we're very grateful for that, and I want to share with you now my ideas and how we plan to try to implement that. It's when you think about agricultural water supply planning, a lot of people think, this ought to be pretty simple to do. It should be. I'm a simple man. Who do I point it at? All right. So it ought to be easy to do. You determine what the irrigated agricultural acreages are now, and you use a number of tools to do that. You use pumpage data from the water management districts that help you quantify the amount of water that's currently being used on existing irrigated agricultural acreage. You estimate what the future irrigated agricultural acreage is going to be, and you multiply by 1 and carry your 2, and you have the demand for agriculture in the future, right? Yeah, I wish it were that simple. And I think most of you in the room understand, some of the limitations of that simplicity. It's a very complicated world out there. We find that, and I think the districts have found, that estimating agricultural water demand in the future is a little more art than science. It's not like relying on population growth curves and infrastructure construction project timelines, and it's just a little more difficult than that. And so, wow, this is touchy. Maybe I'll just drop the slides. You can, yeah, if you can get it to go forward and not bounce back, you'll be more talented than I am. Look at that. Some of the challenges that we face, you think about the diversity of agriculture in Florida. It's more than 300 commodities grown commercially across the state. There's always the changing economic conditions within which those commodities are produced. You have climatic events, you've got disease pressures, you've got, it's a complicated landscape. And all of these things contribute to changing how agriculture uses water and agriculture's demand for water over the long term. Think about how greening has changed the citrus industry in just the last 5 or 6 years. Huge impact on the acreage, huge impact on the actual demand for water, and I would predict that as water data are collected and reported over the next several years, you'll actually see a decrease in irrigated agricultural acreage and agricultural demand as a result of just that one event. And how does the citrus industry recover from that event? We're funding research now with the Southwest Florida Water Management District to understand a little better how HLB compromised trees use water and need water. They may actually need more water as we move forward with their production. So there's a lot of things that kind of complicate the landscape, and trying to predict what that's going to look like 20 years from now is really art more than science. And so we're trying to develop some new tools and new strategies, and I'll show that on the next slide, John, if you want to go to that, to talk about projection methodologies. We think that there's a lot of improvement that can be made in how scientists and how the science determines the water demands for individual commodities. We think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement there. We are going to fund, with some of the money that the representative gave us this year, an augmentation of the crop reporting service in Florida. Typically, those are annual crop reports that are done by the Florida Ag Statistics Service. We're going to give them some funding to beef those reports up on an annually, not only just statewide, which is how they're reported now. We want to see those reported on a county basis, which will give us the refinement we need, kind of the power on the microscope that we need to gather the kinds of data that we are charged now to provide to the districts so they can incorporate those data sets into their water supply plans. We're going to do this in collaboration with the districts. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of really smart, talented people out there that have spent a lot of time doing water supply planning. We want to build on that and collectively help come up with better tools, better opportunities to refine those demand projections in the future. Another thing that we're going to do, just because of the relationship that we have with the University of Florida, is we've already developed teams that are going to go out and help do a lot more ground truthing. What are the real irrigated acres within this county and within this region? What are the real crops? What do the growers want to do in the out years to try to gather a little more, add a little more clarity to the data sets? John, if you could go to the next slide. And talking a little bit about crop trends, I just want to give a couple of examples and then I'll move on. But, biofuels, we talk about agriculture contributing in the energy market. And there's already permits out there to grow significant quantities of biofuels that are already on the books. And it's important to recognize that because there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know whether those technologies are really going to take off. Is there really going to be the demand for those kinds of productions? Are we really going to need 23,000 acres of sorghum in Osceola County? I don't know. But it's in a permit out there now. It may or may not get used, and it's just an area that we need to keep an eye on. We need to watch as the policy in energy and water evolve and be able to deal with these kinds of things, because it's an important nexus between our use of water, our planning for that use of that water, and our energy needs for the long term. So there's a lot of opportunities where energy policy may actually conflict with water policy, or complicate it. Let's not say conflict, but certainly complicate the landscape. Next slide, John. sod is another example. As the population recovers and as development begins to kick back up again, I think you can expect to see sod production to increase accordingly. It dropped way off when the economy went south in 07 and 08, 06, 07, and 08. I think you're going to see it come back. That's a prime opportunity to delve into reuse, reclaimed water. Sod's a perfect commodity for the use of those as an alternative water supply to free up groundwater. We're very supportive of that moving forward. John, the next slide is, nursery, citrus, low-chill peaches. We've got olives now. Blueberries are growing like crazy. Acreage is going up. So we're trying to keep our finger on the pulse of all of those things. But when you're trying to plan over a 20-year horizon, when you can't even figure out what's going to happen in 5, it just is not an exact science by any stretch of the imagination. Go ahead. The other thing that, and this is really probably the last slide that I need to show, is, and I want to emphasize that our role in this new responsibility that we have is only in the water supply planning side of the equation. All right, so we're involved with helping the districts develop what the water demand projections are likely to be for agriculture or land uses in 20 years, 20-year increments, updated every 5 years. We're not inserting ourselves into the permitting program in any way, shape, or form. So this has nothing to do with changing how the districts currently evaluate and process permits for consumptive use. Strictly the planning side of the equation. I think that's an important point for people to understand and not come away with a message that DACS is now going to be permitting water use, because we're not. I think there are still a lot of low-hanging fruit, so to speak, in the water conservation area and increased irrigation efficiencies. We're very much committed to that. We spend millions of dollars a year working with the agricultural industry to retrofit inefficient irrigation systems and convert them to more efficient irrigation systems. We think just in the last year or last 8 years, we've quantified about 50 MGD in reduction of agricultural irrigation through those irrigation system evaluation and retrofitting programs. Not a huge amount of water in the world of public utilities, but pretty significant. 50 MGD is a pretty good, chunk, and we're proud of that. The other things that I think about when I think about water supply demand is, what are the future demand for food and food commodities going to be? You've all heard how the population is going to grow from 7 billion to 9 billion worldwide by 2050. Somebody's going to have to feed that additional 2 billion people. And I think the United States and Florida will certainly play a large role in providing that additional foodstuffs. I don't think we're going to get more water to do it. That's just my personal opinion. We're going to be fortunate if we can hang on to the water that we've got. That's despite the fact that I think you're going to see an increased production per acre, and you're going to see an increase in irrigated acres over that period of time, but probably not a lot of additional water. If you look at how the industry has evolved over the last decade, our water use has been basically flat, despite increasing productions and increase in irrigated acreage. So again, I say that I think that there are many improvements that can still be made in irrigation system design and operation, and we're committed to that. The Commissioner is very committed to make sure that every drop of water used in the agricultural industry is used as efficiently as it can possibly be. But what I want to do is just make sure we maintain, justifiably so, maintain the water that we have access to now to support that continued growth in production that's going to be demanded by the increased population. And with that, I think I'll stop there, John.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Rich.
You're welcome.
So our first test of instruction following. Melissa, any questions? No? Would anybody like to offer a question? I see. There's a question. And make sure the person who asked the first question gets their parking comped today, okay? Okay. Well, this is it. This is from Paul Lahr. Did I say that correct? He's a city of Mount Dora. Do either of you see the fertilizer rules changing in the future?
Well, that's a good first question. Do we see the fertilizer rules changing in the near future? You know, at the end of the day, that's going to depend on a lot of political will. It's going to depend on a lot of factors. Quite frankly, I don't know the answer to that. We have worked since I was elected in 2010. I know that the fertilizer rules and ordinances and relationships and how we manage all of those things to shorten our nutrient runoff has been discussed. There's been bills that have been filed. There's been an effort to get it accomplished, but basically to this point, it hasn't happened. So I guess what I would say is, I don't know. Maybe. Anything's possible, I guess. I hope so. It certainly is a problem that needs to be dealt with, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I presume the question is kind of aimed towards the fertilizer regulations as it relates to how fertilizers are used in an urban environment? Is that, or is it just if you just talk about the fertilizer regulations changing? I think there are going to be some proposals this year that are administrative within the department that change the fee structures for registrations, the fine structures, the part about how analytical data, you know, to confirm that fertilizers have in the bag what the label says is on the bag. There's an effort afoot that I think will be in our department bill to address those issues. As the representative described, relative to fertilizer regulations on, you know, urban use and that kind of thing, it's anybody's guess.
Rich, don't go away. There were several references made to the FARMS program. What is it, and is it statewide?
The FARMS program is an acronym for Facilitating Agricultural Resource Management Systems. It's a program that its genesis was in the Southwest Florida Water Management District. It is a cost share program specifically focused on diminishing groundwater withdrawals or decreasing groundwater withdrawals through the construction and operation and maintenance of alternative water supply projects, typically above ground impoundments, catchment basins, the types of things that allows a landowner to capture his irrigation water and reuse it, or capture local stormwater and reuse it. It is not statewide. It is district-wide. And other districts are very interested. Other districts do alternative water supply projects with the agricultural industry. They are not formalized and don't deal as holistically, perhaps, with the ag industry as the FARMS program does in Swiftmud. But all the districts are very interested in developing alternative water supply projects with the ag industry and have done so.
Has it been successful?
Extraordinarily successful. I won't speak for the district. I see the chair Mr. Baruf is here, and I know Robert Beltran is in the room. I believe there somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 MGD has been offset through the existing contracts that they've got in place. David Rathke, is that about right? Isn't it about 20, about 160 or so projects, 170 projects that has offset 20 MGD in groundwater withdrawals at a reasonable cost